Okay, the recording started. You can begin.
Good night, everyone. Tonight, my fellow group member, Mr. Walcott, and myself, my name is Wahida Prasad, we will be doing Chapter 9, which is Being in Communities. Are you all hearing me clearly? I apologize, it is raining heavily on my end.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can hear you clearly.
Okay. I will start with a short quote to reflect on. It is a quote by Margaret Thatcher. You may have to fight your battle more than once to win it. Okay. Okay, I'll be going on to slides. Next slide, please. What is community? The definition of a community. A community refers to a group of people with common goals and characteristics. The sociological view. This includes social connections between members and common things they share that brings them together. Interests. People within your community that show concern, passion, and interest. Circumstance. Similar to a community of practice, it is driven by position, circumstance, or life experiences rather than a shared interest. Next slide. Community can be a locality. A community could be described as a street, town, village, religion, culture, and music. But recently, a community has evolved to include the online or cyber community. People are no longer limited to social boundaries, which is usually the result of geographical distance. This is made possible through sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Through these sites, communities are formed. Okay, importance of community. The community has long been by natural design, the mold for which individuals and their basic characters is developed. We can consider sporting groups, musical groups, neighbors, and even gangs. Gangs is the negative element of community. They are all part of the community dynamics and silent or visual influences to people who reside in the community. Next slide. Tonight, our areas of focus are what is community, the importance of community, benefits of community, types of communities, community leaders, desirable qualities of community leaders, and lastly, resolving conflicts in community. I will now be passing you on to Mr. Walcott.
Yes, good night, everyone. Um, Before I go on, I would like to ask if any of you all observed the first slide of the red character from Angry Birds. Anybody?
Yeah.
I
Right.
believe so.
Right. Red is significant in the community in that he's an antisocial individual. He likes to be alone, he don't like to mingle with anybody, and he always angry. Not so? So this individual in the community, when the community has an obstacle to face, he now transforms into a leader, right? So therefore, we have a situation where we have skill in building and rebuilding of a community is not just another innumerable requirement of contemporary leadership. It is one of the highest and most essential skills a leader can command. Gardner, 1990. Right? In other words, a leader coming out of such an environment may possess good leadership qualities, listening, guiding, leading, and the ability to be decisive and charismatic. As Sir discussed, about he spoke about charismatic leaders, right? Anybody can name two charismatic leaders. We spoke about it 2 weeks ago. One was Adolf Hitler. Next one was the guy from
Stalin.
yeah, right? So, and we move on. There are many kinds of communities with physical, global, and cyber. Elements of the communities, wholeness incorporating diversity, shared culture, good internal communication, caring, trust, and teamwork, group maintenance, participation, and shared leadership tasks, development of the young people and new members, links to the outside world. Now, if you all recollect, the first lecture, the first chapter this afternoon, when we spoke about forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, these are the qualities that line up alongside it. We go on to Buba of 1958, reminds us that communities speak to us in moral voices. We must mention the environment which causes the relational leader to flourish must value the elements of community, right? Each person belongs to the community of practice, but with varying degrees of centrality. In some communities of practice, we are only peripherally involved. In other words, we are centrally involved. Contributive versus distributive justice. Now, before I go on, let's delve into reality. Some what they call recent activities in our nation. As most of you already recall, I'm a member of the Protective Services, right? And between last week, Friday, to yesterday, two officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service met an unfortunate demise. So they were murdered. Now, my question to you is, being in a community, what should be the recourse, right? Should we, as a public, or as an individual, or as a law-abiding entity, meaning the protective services, prisons, police, fire, army, or the community, meaning the individuals that were murdered, their family, relatives, neighbors, or the politicians? You notice the groupings. Each group is a segment of the community. That is the diversity of the community. So it could be contributive or distributive, right? All with the intent of meeting the end goal of the community. Okay? Now, I was going to put forward an example here, and I use Mr. Bisu as one of the characters. Mr. Bisu had a flat tire in his vehicle, and he asked Ms. Prasad to aid him in changing the flat tire. So she did. Ms. Prasad, on the other hand, went on to assist a neighbor in cleaning a yard, clearing some rubble in the yard. Now, that is a serial reciprocity. I hope I bite my tongue pronouncing that. But each one helps each other in the community. It's not that I do something for you and I expect you in return to do something for me. I help you, and the chain goes on where you help another neighbor, and the next neighbor will help the other neighbor, and it goes on, and it creates a cycle, right? So within that, Arun Gandhi, 1998, Reflections on What Causes Violence in Human Life, stated these facts: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, politics without principle, and rights without responsibilities. Now, anybody want to tell me what is the modern day discussion, especially surrounding the last 2 points, politics without principle and rights without responsibilities? Up to today, that are protesting bothers me about it. Unless only what you watch the news or listen to the news. Okay, there was a big protest in Port of Spain where some citizens marched from Point Fortin to the Queen's Park Savannah to the Prime Minister's office in protest of what they are claiming to be infringing. The government is infringing on their rights. When the Prime Minister speaks to saying they're not forcing vaccination on the public, but indirectly, the measures they're putting in place are pushing and seemingly driving the public in that direction. of forced vaccination. It's an indirect action, but not a direct statement. Right? I hope you all understand that little concept. We move on to benefits of the community. Collaboration which ignites great ideas and plans, guidelines to live or practice, example, religious books, helps to build character, skill building. In a number we gain strength, sense of belonging, create lifelong bonds and relationship, combats depression and loneliness. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. As human beings, we are generally social and we need help, support, and a shoulder rather to lean on in different circumstances in our society and everyday life. Developing communities, we have here a little chart that shows plain language, where the central focus is meaningful community engagement. And we have plain language, information sharing, transparency, dialogue, attitude and behavior, active listening, and relationship building. Right? Types of communities that influence leadership qualities. The first stage is the pseudo community. Second stage of a community building in chaos. The third stage, the realization that many personal feelings, assumptions, ideas, stereotypes, or motives become barriers to truly listening and understanding and being understood. In the fourth stage, true authentic community conflict arises, but there are ways to be heard, and the community members usually know they cannot reach consensus or any level of agreement without dissensus and or disagreements to create truly better decisions. Building a community is creating a, a sense of we out of lots of eyes. Community building principles from Giddicon's 1991. I'm biting my tongue to pronounce that. Inclusive. Wholeness incorporating diversity, links with the outside world, be committed, be unconditionally accepting. Empowering, a shared community, culture, group maintenance, and governance, development of young people or new members, just mentioned before, be understanding, be concerned for both yourself and others. Ethical, caring, trust, and teamwork, be ethical, purposeful, participation and shared leadership tasks, process oriented, good internal communication, be mindful, be careful. So, this brings us to the end of the chapter. All right. But before I get closer, all I'm going to say is to summarize it. The global community of the future will be at best, a series of communities that are interdependent and being communities embracing differences, realizing energy, and build cohesion. The broader global community will be enhanced by the health of many smaller communities that constitute the whole. This brings us to the end of the presentation. This chapter is a very short one. Any questions? Don't you all rush. The Angry Bird family is waiting. No questions?
All right, no questions, guys. All right, I'll pause the recording.